If thou survive my well-contented day, when that churl death my bones with dust shall cover, and shalt by fortune once more resurvey these poor, rude lines of thy deceased lover. Compare them with the bettering of the time, and though they be outstripped by every pen, reserve them for my love, not for their rhyme. Exceeded by the height of happier men, oh, then vouchsafe me but this loving thought: had my friend's muse grown with this growing age, a dearer birth than this his love had brought, to march in ranks of better equipage. But since he died, and poets better prove, theirs for their style I'll read, his for his love. So that was sonnet 32. Holy smokes, that's a lot of sonnets. This is a cool one. This is like more than half not Shakespeare-ish. The last 5 lines, 6 lines, are him speaking from the point of view of the fair youth, which I found super refreshing. And the whole content of this sonnet is kind of it's refreshingly removed from the kind of like I don't want to say magical, but like imagine, he's not talking in this flowery theoretical language. He's talking about like, hey, I'm gonna die someday. I'm just a guy writing words about this person that I care about, and it's interesting because it comes off as self-deprecating with, you know, poor rude lines. He's talking about it, and I think you can interpret that in a number of different ways. It can be that it's real self-deprecating, like, I think that this is garbage. I think that my poetry is bad, and the only redeeming quality of it is that it's expressing that I love you. And that, I don't think that's as, we're dealing with Shakespeare. Like, it's not bad. His poetry's good. So when I read it in terms of like a relativistic, I don't even know if that's the right word for it. It's relative between the quality of his poetry is garbage relative to how important and worthwhile his love is. So even though his poetry is good, it dims in comparison to it being a vehicle for expressing his feelings for the fair youth. And I like that more. And it's, I think, sends a really good message of like, hey, that message I think is great. That it's like, don't like this poem because it's good. Like this poem because it's me saying I love you. And that focus on the act and feeling of being in love and sharing and expressing and showing love as being more important than like being good at things and appreciating things for being good, like objectively good. Because while there are typically some sort of objective things that will lead to someone being in love or falling in love or having feelings of attraction and passion, you know, it's like so-and-so is so well-spoken or beautiful or funny or all these things. When you're in love, you're in love. And it's the time that you're spending should be time spent showing that person you love them, expressing it, and not worrying about what other people think of you or your reputation or things like that. So I think it's a really, and it felt very raw. It felt very, and in some ways it made him more relatable in that he's not talking up his poetry. You know, he's using it as a foil in a good way of like, my poetry's garbage relative to this thing. Like, who cares? Let's not talk about poetry. Let's talk about love. And that really hit with me. But it's interesting because the whole idea of self-deprecation is one that when I was writing about it, when I was taking some notes earlier, I was writing about it, and I've got such mixed feelings on self-deprecation because I feel like, especially in like Shakespeare's time or the 1800s, or you like, one thing I'm thinking of is like when you look at old letters back when people wrote letters, when we didn't have phones and things like that. It seems like there was this kind of general expectation of you to be self-deprecating, of like, I hope you'll consider spending your super valuable time reading this terrible, terrible letter. Like, I mean, in prettier words than that, but that's the essential gist of it. And this kind of, it's not sarcastic, but it's, and I'm also reminded of the, it's a song in Hamilton, but it's the your obedient servant as a sign off. Like when you're signing a letter, you're not signing it truthfully. Like when Alexander Hamilton writes a letter to Aaron Burr and he signs it, your obedient servant, that's a dig. Like, it's not true. It's not, and so it's this frustrating thing with me. It's just like, don't be self-deprecating. Just tell the truth. Don't be like, oh, I'm so bad at this thing. It's like, if you're not bad at it, don't say it, but be self-aware at the same time, because it's not, you shouldn't, I feel like we have the opposite problem in 2017 where we don't have, we've lost that self-deprecation as a societal expectation of people to be, to comport themselves as like overly humble. That's not what people do anymore. But what people do is they don't have any self-awareness. They don't know or recognize if they're good at something, if they're bad at something. Like, I think that honesty and genuine self-awareness need to exist together for things to be not terrible. Like, past 10 days, 14 days or so of living in the United States, it's like self-awareness is something we could all use right now, huh? Like, that would be great if each person, not attack other people, each person maybe say, hey, let me look at myself. Am I the person I think I am? Could I be better? Huh? It doesn't necessarily matter if like, oh, this, us versus them. It's like, if everyone just like said, hey, why don't I try to be an awesome person and not just settle for, well, I'm not the bad guy, they're the bad guy. I feel like that's unequivocal. In any, how do I want to say this? In all circumstances, that's really shitty to just take a pass on that. Take a pass on trying to be a better human. You know what I mean? It's got me on all sorts of tangents. Yeah. People need to be better human beings. End of story. Sonnet 33 next week.